Okay guys, so in this video I'm going to mark a C1 Advanced, that's CAE essay that a student of mine, Francesco, sent me via my writing correction service. So I'm going to mark it and I'm going to show you some mistakes from the writing, and as well you'll see how it's marked on the official examiner assessment criteria. But first, let's just have a look at the question. So it says, you must answer this question. Part 1 is obligatory in the CAE writing exam. Part 1 is necessary. You must answer the Part 1 question. Write your answer between 220 to 260 words in an appropriate style on the separate answer sheet. Okay. So it says, your class has just watched a TV documentary on factors influencing social trends. Now, I can see Francesco's underlined a few parts of this question already, which is a really good thing to do. I recommend all my students do that. And so he's circled factors and he's underlined influencing social trends. You have made the notes below. Factors influencing social trends: communications, opportunities, advertising. Some opinions expressed in the discussion. So remember, it was a TV documentary. The smartphone has transformed social interaction. Education and travel can affect people's tastes, and no one can escape the social pressures of advertising. So it says, write an essay for your tutor discussing 2 of the factors in your notes. So 2 of these factors up here. You should explain which factor you think has greater influence on social trends. So we're discussing 2 and we need to say which one has a greater influence. Giving reasons to support your opinions, okay? And he's underlined giving reasons, which is good. Greater influence, which is important. And to explain which factor. So he's underlined and circled the correct things here. You may, if you wish, make use of the opinions expressed in the discussion. Okay, so that's these opinions here. But you should use your own words as far as possible. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you guys have a quick read of this answer. I'm going to make it smaller. I hope you can see it still. In order that you can have a quick read, maybe pause this video now, see if you can find any mistakes in the video, in the writing, sorry. You can also find mistakes in the video if you want to. Write a comment below if you do. But yes, have a read through this answer and pause the video and write down any mistakes you think you find and give it a mark based on the examiner assessment criteria. I will put a copy to a template of that criteria below so you can write on there, or you can use the online copy. So pause the video now, take as long as you need to do that, and then press play, and I will go through and correct this writing and give it my mark. Okay? Okay, so hopefully you've done that. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to go through, as I do with every student who sends me their writing, and I'm going to move it up so it's easier for you guys to see. And I'm going to correct this writing, and then I'm going to add my comments on this assessment scale template. So let's go. Social trends are part of today's society, and they could be described as peculiar behaviors that become fundamental characteristic of a society. Okay, so, and Google's picked this up as well, maybe. Yeah, if it's one characteristic, then we need to have the article before it. So it could become a fundamental characteristic. Or we could also say become fundamental characteristics, plural. I'm already seeing some less common vocabulary like peculiar and some good, quite big words here, fundamental characteristics. So they're good, and I'm going to write those down to help me with my comments a bit later. So peculiar, fundamental characteristic. I think that the beginning of a writing is really important because it influences the examiner's immediate opinion. And I think that is a good thing. If you can do that in a positive way, I think that's a really good thing. So I would pay attention when you're practicing to the introduction. Using less common words like this is a good way to make the examiner think positively about you. And if they think positively, they're more likely to be influenced in a good way and more likely to give you a higher mark. So let's continue. Peculiar behaviours that become a fundamental characteristic of a society. In the last few years, there have been many changes, such as the development of, okay, so we need to say the internet. With internet, every time we say the internet. In the last few years, there have been many changes, such as the development of the internet, mobile phones, and cheaper flights that have had an important influence in social trends. Yep. I would actually say an important influence on social trends. I don't know if it says that up in here. On factors influencing social trends, it doesn't use the preposition. Sometimes you can, oh no, here we go, influence on social trends. So if you're ever not sure which preposition to use, have a look at the question because it might actually have the right preposition here for you already, and then you can just copy it. So here we see influence on social trends. So that's what it would be here. To make it a bit easier for you to see this in the video format, actually, I'm going to make it bigger. Here we go. Okay. So there's a couple of small mistakes. I'll just mention those down here as well in the language as well. So an incorrect preposition, missing article. Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, that's a good linking word or linking phrase. Not only is it a linking phrase, it's also a good way to introduce your opinion about a topic. So yeah, good phrase to use. As far as I'm concerned, the factor which influence, so we're talking about one factor, so we need to make sure that the verb correlates, and it should be classic mistake for Latin-based language learners, forgetting the S at the end of third-person verbs. The factor which influences the most social trends. So I would actually say which influences social trends the most, and move this to the end. We normally say influence something before how much it influences it by. So influences social trends and then the most. As far as I'm concerned, the factor which influences social trends the most is the communication. So we don't need to say the here, we can remove the. It's communication, generally. When we're talking about something in general, it's not often that we use the article the. I remember, Francesco, you used this phrase in your last writing that I looked at as well, so it might be worth trying to think of a few different phrases you can use for the same thing also. And I think, well, at least if you now have the CAE writing samples book I wrote, then you'll see lots more phrases that you can use in there, similar meanings. So social trends the most is communication, and especially the new communication via social, okay, and especially, so again we don't need to say the, we can just say especially new communication via social network, and again I think you want to put an S here. Probably you will realize a couple of these mistakes, and I think that's why it's really important to spend approximately 5 minutes at the end of your writing to read over your work. Watch out for these types of errors. as a matter of fact. So actually we just say as a matter of fact, singular, no S. As a matter of fact. But again, it's a good word, it's a good phrase to use. It's slightly informal, as a matter of fact. It's kind of like what we would say when we're speaking. You can call this colloquial. So I would advise against using it in an essay, because an essay should be more formal or neutral language. So also this sentence here, as far as I'm concerned, is slightly informal. So there's just a couple of things which again I'll note down here at the bottom for later. Some of the language is slightly too informal for an essay. Okay, so I'm sort of seeing a couple of good things, a couple of bad things at the moment, and kind of thinking in the middle, maybe around a 3. Let's see. As a matter of fact, the way we communicate has been influenced a lot by the development of, okay, so again, same thing, the internet and technology. If you should have a look, Francesco and other students who watch this video, at the assessment criteria for the writing, and I have made a video about that on my YouTube channel. And that's really important to read and understand what the examiners are looking for when they mark your writing. And they will say things like slips and errors and these types of words, which are really useful to get to know. So I would recommend examining their criteria in some detail. And then also practicing marking other students' work, which is fantastic. That's why I asked students to have a look at this writing before I started critiquing it. It's a really good way to learn. If you're as good as a teacher and you know what to look for in the exam and in writings, then you're going to get a much higher mark. So to know a subject well enough to be able to teach it, it's a great way to be, and it shows that you are a master in that subject. Okay, so internet and technology. Therefore, good word. Internationally, good linking phrase. Again, that's what they look for, and that would be in the organization criteria. Linking. So we can say, for example, some linking words and phrases have been used. To start a new paragraph, but also to connect ideas within a paragraph, helping maintain a good structure. Those types of things also help with the communicative achievement. They help to the flow of the writing and how easy it is to understand. Communicative achievement being this second criteria examiners use. Okay, so therefore internationally widespread social networks such as Twitter, Instagram and TikTok have created ways of communicating that make it very easy to spread a peculiar social trend. So I remember you used the word peculiar earlier, up here. So it'd be good to try and use a different word if you can. And I'm not sure if peculiar is exactly the right word that you want to use here. I think you mean maybe a specific social trend, for example. Peculiar means strange. And it's not necessarily a strange social trend, I don't think, but maybe quite a specific or a niche social trend. By imitate, so by as a preposition. After a preposition, if you use a verb, it should be with an ing. By imitating the trends of other countries. Okay. Get a glass of water. Other people may say that advertising is shaping social trends because of its unescapable, okay, so it should be, okay, Google's helping me here. No, it should be inescapable. Its good way to practice your writing actually is with Google, with the spell checker, because it's pretty accurate. Not 100%, but it's quite good. And we can say, see, it says imitating, it says inescapable, it says influences, so yeah, it can help because of its inescapable influence on consumers. Okay, maybe we could think of another word for influence, because we've used influence up here, but influence is also used in the question, so I think it's actually not a bad thing, because it does show that you're keeping in line with the question. So other people may say that advertising is shaping social trends because of its inescapable influence on consumers. Okay, although it surely plays an important role, and everywhere we go we are surrounded by advertising. Although it surely plays an important role, and everywhere we go we are surrounded by advertising, in my humble opinion, I would put a comma here, we are totally used to them and we know how to ignore them, so they don't have such a big influence on social trends. Okay, so it's quite a long sentence, but that's okay. Remember, the ideas that you have are actually not that important. It's the language you use, how you structure your answer, and how easy it is to understand your ideas, which is the important thing, and whether you're answering the question. But your specific ideas, the content of your ideas, what you think about something, that's not really important. Okay, that's a good phrase in my humble opinion. I'd say maybe the word humble is good. It also does make it slightly informal again. In my opinion, would be less formal, more formal, less informal, and then it doesn't add so much emotion. But it is good to show a variety of language, so I think it's as good as it is bad in this situation, this expression. So I think it's fine. We are totally used to them. Okay, so using a bit of grammar structure here, and I'll have a think about that a bit more as we go through. Different grammar structures used. Okay, we've got some present perfect up here, present continuous. So it's good. It's good that you're using a few different could be described as. It's good that you're using a few different grammatical structures. I'm just going to quickly note that down here. I'll try and write it like an examiner. There is evidence of different grammatical structures. For example, the present perfect. Back up. Okay, I think that's fine. I think this is actually quite a good paragraph. So on to the conclusion. In conclusion, and I would put a comma here, it's evident. So watch out for using these, as I said in your last writing, Francesca, using these. Of course, you wrote this before watching the last video. But watch out for these contractions. Contractions tend to be more informal. I notice you used one up here as well. I would try not to use contractions in an essay. So we can correct that. It is evident that what influence, okay, so again, same as earlier, what influences, or the thing that influences the most social trends, and again, it's the same thing. So what influences social trends the most are the ways of communicating, our ways, again, same thing. Our ways of communicating actually, that's okay. You can say the, because it's a specific way of communicating. The ways of communicating used by the people of today. Okay, yeah, that's fine. You got to read it again to understand the sentence. In conclusion, it is evident that what influences social trends the most are the ways of communicating used by the people of today. Okay, I think this sentence could be written. Takes me a little while to read it and understand it. So I think it could be written slightly in a slightly different way to make it easier to follow. So I'll make a note of that down here. For example, in the conclusion, and that would be under the communicative achievement criteria, the flow of the writing. And also in communicative achievement would be how engaged the target reader is. And so part of that engagement comes through writing something which is easy to follow. It keeps me engaged. They have the peculiarity, so again, that's that same word peculiar in a slightly different form, but if we could use a different word, that would be even better. They have the peculiarity to make the world smaller and spread a new trend amazingly rapidly. Okay, so maybe they have the ability, maybe it's a false friend peculiarity and peculiar in Italy, I guess you're from, Francesco. I may be wrong, but it's worth having a check of the word peculiar and making sure you understand what it means in English, because it could be similar to a word in your language, but it actually might have a different meaning to that word. As I said, peculiar, it's something a bit strange in English. It's not a positive thing, I wouldn't say, most of the time. They have the ability to make the world smaller and spread a new trend amazingly rapidly, with the feature that it will affect a big amount of people in a small amount of time. Okay, I'm not sure if I'd say with the feature that it will do this. Maybe with the possibility that it will affect. Might be worth just changing this word, and I'll highlight it for that reason. That it will affect a big... Okay, so that's good, using will affect in another verb tense, using the future. The only thing is, amount is with uncountable nouns. Even English people get this confused all the time. The correct word would be to say a big number of people in a small amount of time. Okay, so let's go back to the examiner's marking criteria again. I've already got some notes here to help me. So the communicative achievement, I said about this, it could be slightly easier to follow at times. For example, in the conclusion, this would also help keep the target reader engaged, which would be a very good thing. Let's have a bit more of a think about communicative achievement. And let's have a look. I haven't mentioned the content yet, so have a read of I was focusing more on language and things here, so let's read the question again quickly. So what does it want us to do? It wants us to discuss two of these factors. Explain which has the greater influence on social trends. Okay, so you've talked about, let's see here, it should be obvious from the main paragraphs. It's communication via social networks, for example, and technology, and also advertising and its effect on consumers. So we've got advertising and we've got communication. Good. So on the first look, it seems like you've answered both of those two main things. I'm going to have a read in a bit more detail to make sure. Okay, so you are talking about social media influencing communication or factors influencing social trends. So yes, social media through communicating, influencing social trends. That does seem to be what you're talking about here. Yeah, spreading social trends by easy communication. Okay. And let's have a look at this next main point. Advertising. Okay, but you're actually saying it doesn't have a big influence on social trends, advertising, because it's sort of in the background and we don't notice it so much. So what influences social trends the most is the ways of communicating. Yep, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Good. So you've answered communications, you've talked about advertising. You should explain which factor you think has the greatest influence, which you've done, giving reasons to support your opinions. Yeah, okay, I think you could maybe go into making the first one a little bit stronger. I see you said it's easier to spread specific social trend by imitating the trend of other countries. I don't quite understand exactly what you mean by this, or I think this could be expanded so that I can see a stronger point that you're trying to make here. It's good that you've used examples like social media, but yeah, I think this could be made slightly stronger, especially if it is your main reason which you're backing up in the conclusion. This one isn't your main reason, so I think that's fine, and you have explained why it's not as, or why you don't think it influences us so much. So that's good. But yeah, maybe I'd look to actually add a little bit more strength to this main argument about the communication point. So I'd probably give it a 3 based on that. Let's say all parts of the question have been adequately addressed. The target reader can see which points the writer is discussing, which of the 2 points the writer is discussing in the essay. It is, and that's helped by the structure as well, separate paragraphs, good. It is also clear that which the writer, which is you are the writer, thinks has the biggest influence on social trends. The first main point about communication could be made slightly stronger, and what I'm going to say, which is also to do with communicative achievement, is that there is that sentence at the end of the first paragraph, the second paragraph, but this sentence here, I didn't quite get that, and so I suppose you mean that if one trend starts in one country, then the same trend happens in another country, or that you see one trend in another country, so someone maybe copies that trend in their country. I guess that's what it means, but I think it could be made a bit clearer. And so in communicative achievement, there are 1 or 2 places in the essay where the arguments could not only be strengthened, but could be expanded. Expanded and strengthened to help the target reader follow and understand the main points. Okay, so for that reason, I'm also going to give it a 3. Also with this point that I've made up here, it could be easier to follow at times. For example, in the conclusion. I think it's possible an examiner could give it a 2 for communicative achievement, but I'm going to give it a 3, I think. Organization seems pretty good on the surface. You've got 4 main paragraphs: introduction, conclusion, and your 2 main points. On a individual paragraph level, you have expanded, although it's surely linking your ideas together. So good structure. Yep. Okay. So to maintain a good structure and also to express your ideas and opinions. For example, the word therefore, as far as I'm concerned, etc. On an overall on a wider view, it's quite easy to see the overall structure, which is good as well. So just from a basic broad stroke look at the essay, I can see the structure. So the whole essay has a good structure, and therefore I'm going to give it a 4. Whew, I think my brain's beginning to get a little bit tired now. It's quite intense doing these writing sometimes, especially when trying to focus a lot, but we're nearly done. Language 3, there is evidence of different grammatical structures, for example, the present perfect, of different and a variety of grammatical structures, for example, the present perfect. It would be good to see you attempting some more complex grammatical structures, I would say. Didn't see too many complex ones. So we're talking like mixed conditionals, for example, that type of thing. I think that would help, and I think that would impress examiners, especially if you can use them correctly. There are some less common words and phrases used. For example, peculiar, fundamental characteristic. However, there is some repetition of certain words where there is opportunity to show more variety and a wider knowledge of language. Wider knowledge of the English language specifically. There are a few small errors. For example, using an incorrect preposition. Or missing an article. For anyone who has examined the marking criteria in detail, they make a distinction between slips and errors. So a slip is where you make one mistake, maybe just accidentally a spelling mistake, for example, whereas an error is an actual mistake which you keep making over and over. So I noticed that there are a couple of errors because some of them you have made the same mistake more than once. So it's not a slip in that situation, it's an error. Some of the language is slightly too informal for an essay as well. Yeah. So again, maybe an examiner would give it a 2. And they might, if you used a few more grammatical structures, could push it up to a 3. I think I would. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think it's quite doing enough for me to want to give it a 3. I'd like to see a bit more. You started off in a good way with these big words. I think I'd like to see a few more of those and a few more grammatical structures. So for that reason, I'm going to give it a 2. Also for the reason that the examiners are quite harsh in their marking, I think, and so I'm trying to also be a bit harsh with my marking. It's possible that an examiner might change one or two of these either way, one higher or one lower. But overall we can see 3342. So I always do this at the end of my writing correction service, so we can see what marks we've got, which is 6, 10, 12 out of 20, which is a pass. Just you need 12 out of 20 to pass part 1 and 12 out of 20 to pass part 2. You actually don't need to pass both parts, as I said in the last video. You actually don't need to pass the writing paper to get the certificate, but you do need to average 60% across all 5 sections of the exam. But if you did get 12 and you got 12 for the part 2 writing, you would pass the CAE writing paper. Whew, so there we go. Well done, Francesco. Thank you for sending that to me. I hope this feedback was useful. Remember to check out my website for more writings and my CAE writing samples book, where you can find loads more useful information and you can critique other writings with me. I see that my background here has got a bit fuzzy. I think it's because the light has gone down, but I hope you could see me and I hope you could see the screen okay when I did that. I'm going to finish the recording now. For anyone else who's watching, remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel, press the bell to receive any notifications. And yeah, adios, amigos.